You may notice that when I type questions, sometimes the words have different colors. If I just type MAN, the word is grayed out. If I finish the word, it becomes black and Power BI knows what it means. If you find a query of yours has lots of gray words in it, that means Power BI is not interpreting those words. Sometimes you see words underlined with yellow. This means that is an entity in your data model. If you click it, you get a drop-down of other potential entities you might be talking about. Why is it giving me these three options? It's giving me the column that I want, but also the table where the column resides. It's also giving me an unrelated column. All it has in common is that it's in the same table. Similarly, if I change that entity to months, then it gives me initially the entity I want, but it gives me the option of that initial column. By default, Power BI guesses what entities I want to ask about and creates relationships for how those entities interact. For example, it's made a relationship between each column and a table. I want to trim down those options because I know my users don't need them, and I don't want my users to get confused. Here we are looking at that schema. I don't want people to be asking about the table, so I'm just going to delete that. I also don't want people using those relationships, so I'll delete those too. I'll add a helpful comment saying deleted table and relationships, so that a few months down the line I remember why I did this. Let's import that schema and see what difference it makes. It's still here. What's going on? Let's export the schema again. Interesting. So the date table has come back, and so have the relationships. What's going on here? Firstly, when we import something into Power BI, such as the schema where we deleted these things, it considers that as the starting point and helpfully adds anything that might be helpful. We need to specify that the entity should stay deleted permanently. Now I'm going to import that. And let's ask the question again. Now we are only getting a single option when we ask about the months, a single option for the days, and if we specifically ask about the date, which might be the date table, it's still only giving us the option for the column. If we ask specifically for the table name, then we get it grayed out. It does not recognize it. So by keeping it deleted, then we no longer have that table working. One thing you'll also notice is that the comment I added here is gone. That's because the comment cannot affect the logic that Power BI takes in from the imported schemas, and therefore it discards it. I suggest that you put your schemas into source control so that you can preserve your comments explaining why decisions were made. One advantage of source control is also that you control the layout of your schema. You'll notice that initially the table date entity was at the top of the file, but then after we've tried deleting it and put it back into the Power BI document and then exported it, it appended it to the very bottom of the entities section. I find it easier to have everything in a known hierarchy, so source control would allow me to do this. Another reason to use source control. A lot of your queries will be coming not from a formula within Power BI Desktop, but via a query from the query editor into an external data source. You could add lots of synonyms to that query, and then you might disable that query in the query editor while you do some changes to it. Then, when you tell it to start loading itself to the desktop, you'll find out that all your synonyms have disappeared. Once a query stops being loaded, the Power BI Desktop discards all those synonyms. Source control would let you keep that. One final reason to keep source control is that you might be adding more tables into your data model, and then the Power BI schema will automatically create entities and relationships for it. However, you might then decide you'll delete that table from your data model, and the Power BI schema will still hang on to all those entities and relationships just in case it comes back. So that can clutter up your schema file. Use source control, keep a firm hand on your schema, and that way it'll only have what you require. Let's quickly export that schema to show one final thing. Keep in mind that we've got the deleted table here, but the relationships were still present when we imported the file. Now that we've exported the file again, then the schema has removed the relationships because they were tied to this date table, and that date table is no longer present inside the schema. It's deleted.